Welcome back to Specifically About Quality, the Qualitywise podcast where we talk openly about real quality problems, the ones that don't disappear just because the procedure says they should. I'm Agata Lewkowska with many years of experience in automotive quality systems.
And I'm Christopher Scott, bringing my expertise in quality assurance and operational excellence to the table. As always, we're very glad you're here with us. If this podcast is helpful for you, we invite you to our podcast newsletter. For every episode, we prepare a newsletter with additional materials, free resources, and practical downloads related to the topic, and with access to all previous freebies from previous episodes. You can sign up directly on our website at Qualitywise under resources, or with the link provided with this podcast episode in the description. Expect the podcast newsletter every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central European Time.
Today, we're talking about PPAP, Production Part Approval Process, and not the checkbox PPAP, not the we submitted something to the customer who approved it somehow, but PPAP as it really works in real life.
Because if you listen carefully to quality managers, engineers, and even production teams, the same sentence keeps coming back. We passed the PPAP, but we still have problems. So let's talk about the real reason behind PPAP, Agata.
Yes, let's start with the most honest question customers ask, even if they don't say it directly. Why do we need PPAP at all? Chris, this is a great question to start.
Yes, it's a great question. And it's one of my favorite topics. In the last 15 years or more in the automotive industry, for me, I've worked with PPAP either as a supplier, as the customer, and several different OEMs, as you know. PPAP is from the customer's perspective. It's not just about documentation, the elements, as it's called in the manual, ticking boxes. It's about the risk. It's about asking, can you consistently produce this part at volume without any surprises?
Oh, and that's already, I would say, our first misunderstanding. Many organizations treat PPAP as a one-time submission, while customers treat it as evidence of process understanding and control by their supplier.
That's right. And when customers review a PPAP, they're not just checking if all 18 elements exist. They're checking if those elements tell one coherent story about the process.
Yes, a story where, for instance, FME logic matches to the control plan, where later MSA supports the measurements used, and where capability data actually reflects stable production, not a rush pre-launch snapshot. But of course, to answer this question, why do we need PPAP at all? We need to also come back to one of the previous podcast episodes dedicated to APQP itself, or project management, where we discussed also about the PPAP, how important element of closing the project it is to come from pre-serial production to the serial production, yes? So please bear in mind that PPAP is not an isolated core tool. In fact, we did not use this statement that this is one of the core tools. But we need to also state, to meet quality management system requirements under IATF, we have also the requirement about product approval process, yes? And of course, it's not here that we need to have a documented process in our organization, because the logic behind it is that there are already defined manuals prescribing the PPAP, but we shall have established, implemented, and of course, maintained product and manufacturing process approval, conforming, of course, to the requirements which are defined by our customers. What is also said by the IATF in terms of PPAP is that we need to take into consideration if when we are going with our PPAP to our customer, is it also before connected with the supplier PPAPs? Because the requirement would be that we shall approve externally provided products from our suppliers prior to the submission to the customer, because we want to avoid the situation that later the supplier PPAP in our supply chain will be rejected. But still, I am already in the PPAP process with my customer. So you can imagine how customer would be, let's use a very soft word, disappointed. So this is important, okay? And of course, let's remember about the records of this, what is happening under PPAP process. But at the very beginning of this podcast episode, Chris, I would like to clarify one important thing. Currently, we have two approaches to do product and manufacturing process approvals. This is AIG PPAP, Production Part Approval Process, and the VDA approach, which is described in VDA 2. which is called PPA, yes, PPA process. So I would like us to do some small introduction. What are the differences? And later we will maybe pick up one favorite path to discuss.
I experience this all the time with tier one suppliers, especially when they take one of the manuals and they say, we do the VDA version or we do the PPAP one. One of the biggest misunderstandings around PPAP is that people believe there's only one correct way to do it. And this way is very universal, but it's not the case. Usually when we say PPAP, almost everyone immediately thinks about the version published by the AIAG or the Automotive Industry Action Group. That's completely natural because AIAG PPAP is by far the most widely known and applied, purely because of it's dominated by most OEMs. And the other type is what we're going to move on to is about the European one, the German one, which is VDA2, which is specific to people like Daimler, like the Volkswagen Group and so on. It's a very specific type of approach and sometimes more prescribed.
It is also worth to mention that currently, when we record this episode, so this means in first quarter of 2026, we have currently yellow volume issued by VDA QMC organization, which is the first step before the new 7th edition will be issued. And as far as I remember, till the very beginning of April, there is still a possibility to give feedback on this yellow volume to VDA QMC. And that's important to understand also that AIG PPAP and VDA2 are not contradictory systems. They are actually aiming for exactly the same objective, giving the customer confidence that the product and the manufacturing process are ready for serial production.
And the difference lies in how our confidence is built. AIG PPAP is strongly structured, very document-oriented, and clearly checklist-driven. It defines elements, submission levels, and formal approval logic in a very explicit way.
VDA2, on the other hand, puts much more emphasis on the process of proving readiness, not just on the final submission. And it focuses on planning, coordination, and organizational maturity rather than on delivering a complete document package at the very end.
And this difference has very real consequences in daily practice. We often see suppliers who are not comfortable with the AIG PPAP logic, but struggle when they face VDA2 expectations, not because they lack documents, but because the mindset is different. VDA2 is very risk-oriented.
Exactly. VDA2 expects evidence that readiness is built step by step, over time, and across functions. So it's less about have you submitted everything, and much more about have you demonstrated control and capability. So as you said also, Chris, this is very risk-based thinking relevant.
And if you don't understand that difference, you can end up in a very frustrating situation. You're technically compliant, but still not meeting customer expectations. And I'm going to add a little bit about this. When I worked in the Nissan world, which is very much the AIG PPAP method, they've got their own version, their own naming of it. Every customer tends to have that, and the manual is the foundation. But I started to work with German OEMs and suppliers when I moved away from that environment. I had to adapt, learn the VDA approach. And as a customer, I was quite frustrated because they were, saying we'd use VDA, but as a customer, my requirements were still AIG. So there was definitely a mismatch between the different requirements.
Mm-hmm. Let's pick up one way today, because AIG PPAP is by far the most widely known and globally applied reference. We'll talk about AIG approach, okay, which in our opinion is more populated. Chris, so what PPAP is not maybe?
Well, one of the most common mistakes is that we see treating PPAP as a paperwork exercise done by the quality department. It's their job to get it submitted to the customer for approval, often created in isolation, weeks after the process was already running. And then people wonder why customers come back with questions or rejection comments, which I do quite frequently.
Another big issue is misunderstanding PPAP levels. Level 3 becomes a default without asking whether the customer expectation, product risk, or change scope really justify it. And let's be clear, submitting more documents does not mean submitting better PPAP or exposing ourselves and show inconvenient truth. Customers are not impressed by volumes of the documentation, I would say. They want consistency and reliability. However, the PPAP scope depends on the situation trigger. And this is now about the awareness, what has to be done and what has to be submitted. So let's maybe talk now, Chris, why PPAP breaks down in practice.
So talking about real-life breakdowns, one scenario we've seen very often is PPAP is prepared before the process is actually stable. And capability studies are based on short runs, controlled conditions, or golden operators instead of real production variation in reality. There is a new SBC manual for AIG VDA, which is under development for the yellow revision, and it's defining the use of capability metrics for stable and unstable processes. It's not just doing that, it shows how to do it step by step in terms of what is required, what to do, different examples. So it definitely is an improvement on the already released manual by AIG. Again, this is a note, it's a caveat, it's still in development, some things may change, but I'm looking forward to the release, Agata.
Yes, I'm also looking forward to this new manual, definitely, because when we deliver in Qualitywise SPC or SPC MSA training, people definitely will be asking about this. And this is normal. Everyone is curious. This is one of the core tool, statistical process control, so mandatory, yes. IATF is also saying that we need to mandatorily use statistical process control, so we need to learn. Okay, but let me talk about another common problem, which I see that this is misalignment between engineering changes and PPAP updates. Changes happen, yes, tooling adjustment, parameter changes, but PPAP documentation mostly stays frozen. PPAP documentation is actually a second step, yes, the production documentation also stays frozen, I should say like that. This may lead to a dangerous situation. The customer believes one process exists while production runs another. Yes, customer is completely in a different thinking about our process, has different information than currently our process is behaving. Yes, I find reason for this with no knowledge when PPAP shall be submitted. Quality department is aware probably of this, but what about engineering department? Yes, so now it's really important to understand when we need to submit a PPAP to the customer or simply when we need to notify the customer that there are some situations, some circumstances in our organizations under which we shall prepare a PPAP, yes? But in many cases, even during the trainings, I have a feedback like, we prefer not to notify our customer because later probably he will definitely want a PPAP and we will have problem. No, we can't think like that. That is not a pure, let's say, according to the book behavior.
Exactly. And it's about transparency. And we've said this before in our podcast. When you are honest and transparent with your customers, most of the time they'll want to help. Sometimes there's a cost impact, sometimes there's a change of contracting conditions. But for the most part, we both want one vision and one goal, which is quality and reliability. Now, just to advise our listeners in terms of from an OEM perspective, I've worked for a couple of OEMs. What you should do in that situation is understand, do they have a supplier quality manual or supplier quality handbook on their website or something which the procurement department might have? They will have customer specific requirements for PPAP notification versus the manual. The manual itself for PPAP is a guide. It gives you the foundations of how to do it, but it will never say exactly what each OEM does for customer specific requirements. And finally, what I need to add in there, Agata, is the human factor. Operators often don't know what they do every day is directly linked to PPAP. This is approved by the customer. So PPAP is a way of communicating our process, what is normal. I'll give a small example where I worked with a supplier where they changed the number of operators from 6 down to 4 because of capacity, and they didn't realize that can affect it because is it the original 4 people? Are they the ones that should be on the process, or are they brand new trained temporary operators by an agency? Context is everything. So let's get onto some more practical examples, Agata. What does good PPAP implementation actually look like from your perspective?
Oh, good question. And honestly, I must tell you that when I was quality engineer in my first job in Automotive, I was responsible for preparing PPAP and submitting it to the customer. And I really like this activity. So I can tell you because I did a lot of these PPAPs. So here's a practical example, maybe. Instead of preparing PPAP at the end, the better is for the organization to build PPAP into the project management, yes, milestones, because this will be a smooth preparation for the final moment when we need to submit. Everything will be controlled. I mean, there won't be any surprises, yes? When we change something in the process, the documentation must be adjusted accordingly, yes? So it can't be done in the hurry, in the press series, all the documentation, and later, because PPAP also has its own deadline, yes? The PO number, when it is expected to be delivered to the customer, yes? So we need to keep it in mind, yes? So it's not that like we will just do it when the process will be already installed and we will have 100% confidence that we are ready to collect the documentation. Sometimes, no, you need to start much earlier. For instance, the FMEA is one of the documents which should be in the PPAP package. However, with the FMEA is a big discussion. Of course, no one wants to put FMEA in full in this PPAP package, but at least the first cover, for instance, as an evidence, is a best practice that at least your customer will be informed that you have this FMEA, and of course it has to be available when he will decide that I would like to review it, yes? And this is mostly one of the mistakes which I observe. You sometimes are thinking, the organizations are thinking that if something doesn't have to be necessarily submitted, I still have time to finish it or to prepare it, but no, later there will be new issues and you won't have time to come back to do it, okay? So this is from my practical experience as the quality engineer preparing PPAPs. You always be ready when the PPAP must be submitted in this moment, in full, with all the documentation.
Exactly. And the best supplies in my experience as an OEM is that they're treated just as part of the project timelines. It's a milestone. It's a development, in its own definition. It's the PPAP approval process. It's a process. It's not just ticking boxes. So from another example from an automotive company, that we've worked with, they involve production supervisors in directly reviewing the process failure mode effect analysis and the control plan before the PPAP submission. So they're assessing the risks of the process, they're looking at the controls, the reaction plans, and the frequency of the checks or inspection. This suddenly changed everything. Suddenly PPAP wasn't a quality paperwork or document exercise. It became a shared operational reference. So what was the result? Well, the result was that fewer customer questions, fewer deviations after the start of production or the launch, and far more confidence during audits.
So if there's one thing to remember from today's episode, it's this. PPAP is not a documentation set, okay? It's a decision-making framework. A framework that tells your customer, we understand our process, we understand our risks, and we are in control. And we are sharing this information with you, dear customer.
If you want to go deeper, we prepared a free downloadable PPAP support file for this episode. PPAP in real life, from customer expectations to approval without firefighting. It's a practical guide by Qualitywise. Subscribe to our Qualitywise newsletter on Qualitywise website under resources or with the link provided with this episode to get it. And if PPAP is currently a challenge for your organization, whether before a customer submission or after repeated rejections, this is exactly where Qualitywise can support you. We invite you to the Qualitywise PPAP training. Just ask us for details.
Thanks for joining us today. If you have ideas, questions, or experiences to add, please share them in the comments. And don't forget to like and share this episode. It helps us reach more quality professionals like you.